Hi everyone, it's Yvette Le Blowitz from SPAITGIRL.com and welcome to the SPAITGIRL Talk Show podcast. I'm super excited to be here with you today and with our very special guest, Dr. Zoe Shaw, who is a life coach, relationship therapist. She is also trained in psychotherapy and a licensed psychotherapist. She's a mum of 5, a writer, a podcast host, and super grateful to be here with you today. Dr. Zoe Shaw, welcome. How are you today?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
And thank you to our Spirit Girl podcast audience who are tuning in globally. Zoe, before we go into your expertise, which is relationships, are you happy to tell everyone a little bit about yourself and what inspired you to become a licensed psychotherapist and what actually that is?
I am a licensed psychotherapist, which essentially means that I have studied psychology. I have a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and I have a doctorate in clinical psychology. And so, a psychotherapist really works with people and helps them with their emotional, psychological, mental health, helps them with their relationships, helps them be able to dive deep and look at motivations, look at places that they're stuck, look at patterns that have developed over their lifetime or sometimes as a result of trauma. So that's the kind of work that I do. I specialize in working with women and couples. And I'm a mom of 5. I've been married for 27 years. We just celebrated, which is crazy. And I'm also an athlete and I love to write. I'm an author and speaker, podcaster. That's kind of who I am. You asked me what got me into psychotherapy to begin with. I'm one of those people who always knew that I wanted to be a psychologist, that I wanted to study people. And I think that I got that love partially from my mom. She majored in psych in college and she had me when she was very young. And I used to actually go to school with her and sit in her psych classes. I think I'm sure it all just went totally over my head, but somehow I was primed, I think. And so it's just always been an interest. My mom was a people watcher. She'd always talk to me about people's drives and motivations. And so I kind of was steeped in it. And it's a talent, I think, that I've honed. And I just really enjoy working with people.
Your mum sounds like such an incredible woman to take you to school. She's very driven, very motivated. And what an incredible upbringing, being surrounded with the knowledge and the wisdom and growing up in this moment in time where you were learning about psychology from a very young age and her sharing her passion and love and you developing an interest. She must be so proud of you that you've followed in her footsteps as well.
I think that she is, yeah.
And what about your children? Are they growing up with you really kind of teaching them some psychotherapy or positive psychology?
Obviously, I see everything through the lens of psychology, right? I don't know. I mean, that's a good question because it's just kind of how I am. And same thing, I think that on one level, they're steeped in it. I have a son who's a little interested in sociology. My other kids could care less about psychology. They have other places and desires and interests, and that's fine because they need to be who they are.
When it comes to relationships, what really drew you to wanting to become like a relationship expert and to help particularly women in relationships?
Well, I started out thinking that I would be a child therapist, and I did my pre-doc internship at a clinic for children who were sexually abused, and it was good work. It was really good work, but I quickly figured out that I didn't have as much interest in working with the children as I did with the parents, and I could see where I could really intervene and help more by working with a parent than a child because the child has no control over their system, right? And so you really have to work with the people who have control over the system in order for any real change to happen. And so after I left my pre-doc and went into private practice, I just started learning that I just loved couple work, the energy, and a lot of therapists are afraid of it. It feels overwhelming. It feels kind of intimidating to have 2 people in the room. And then sometimes there's high, conflict. For me, I just love it. I loved kind of honing in on what the real issue is, because often what we're fighting about is never what the issue is, right? And so I just over time started to really enjoy working with couples. I also, having gotten married as a teenager, I had a lot of difficulty and some dysfunction in my marriage. And I really started to develop a desire to help women who are in that same place find a way to develop some strength, get out if they need to, or figure out how to change their system. And so that's a big passion of mine, to help women recognize that, number one, they're not stuck. Number two, they're not broken. And number three, there's something that they can do about it if they're not happy in their relationships.
After 27 years of being married, what are some of your tips? Like, how do you keep the marriage fresh?
That's a good question. And I think that on some level, it's different for everybody. So, whatever things we might do in our marriage aren't necessarily going to apply to another marriage. I think Esther Perel's book, Mating in Captivity, was really eye-opening when it comes to looking at what happens in a marriage over time and how intimacy can be lost, how disconnection can happen, how desire can wane. And so it really is about working on seeing your partner from an outside perspective, because when you're in the woods, you can't see them anymore in the same way that you used to, right? But I think that honestly, it comes down to perseverance, commitment, and a diligence to try to know yourself better and know your partner better.
And how would you suggest to know yourself better? What would be some thing our listeners could try just to get to know themselves better? Because I know when you're a busy mum, all of your spare time is focused on them. And I've spoken to a lot of women who said it was really easy being in a relationship with my partner turned husband when we had no kids. But when the kids came into the mix, it was all about the kids. And we really lost that intimate connection.
I think on one level, it's really about acknowledging where you are in your life, right? There's that saying that says women are, I'm not going to get it correct, but it's close to this, that basically women are expected to work as if they don't have children, and women are expected to parent their children as if they don't work, right? And that's obviously for a working woman in our society, but that is so true. And there's such a huge burden that gets placed on our relationships as a result of that statement. So yes, there's a big burden that gets placed on us as women, and that burden then gets passed on to our relationships, usually via resentment, anger, frustration, jealousy, and that creates distance. And so I think the first step in knowing yourself is to really look clearly at what your present situation is and all the feelings that you have about it, whether you think the feelings are good, without judgment. Look at all the feelings that you have about it and start to pull those up and untangle those and be honest about where you are right now. Because a lot of women have difficulty being honest about where they were. It's a, yes, this is going on, but I should feel this way, or this should. And when you're living in the shoulds, then you're not actually honoring what you're really feeling and who you are. I have a client right now who's having difficulty bonding with her newborn baby. And she has all of these shoulds about how she should be as a mom, instead of recognizing that there's a whole spectrum, right, of types of attachment. There's a whole spectrum of the way that we bond, and there isn't just one perfect. And so it's really important to honor the way you are, but first figure out what that is and acknowledge it without judgment.
One of the common concerns that always get raised with me is my husband has time to play golf, catch up with his friends, to do whatever he wants, but I have to stay at home and do the housework. I have to look after the kids. So I go without my walk or being able to do my yoga session. How can someone, like a woman, have a conversation about what their needs are? And how could they go about raising awareness with their husband? Like, I too have needs, and to find more of a balance.
I think that is an excellent question. And my initial response, and I know that there's always a lot more, these are complicated issues, but my initial response is your husband does those things because he does those things, right? And what often happens with a wife is that she's looking for permission. She's looking for his agreement that it's okay and that it matters. And she's entering it from the wrong place. She wants to express her emotions to her husband. She wants her husband to feel these things and understand why this is so important to her. Her husband doesn't do any of those things to her. Her husband doesn't come to her and say, listen, these video games are really important for my mental health. And this is really important for me emotionally. And so I really need you to be okay with me going out and doing those things. No, he does them, right? And so you two are in this agreement that his needs don't require any kind of permission or any kind of validation, that he just takes them, but your needs do. And that's not okay. And so the first step is not to convince your husband that you need this, not to get him to understand emotionally, but to simply take it. I know it sounds easy to say, but not easy to do because your system's not set up that way. And so in order to do that, there's some upheaval that has to happen. Because when you look at your husband and say, hey, I'm going here, you've got the kids for a couple hours, I'll see you later. Well, that's not the agreement that you guys have. Right? And so there is going to be some upheaval, but when you start taking it and owning the fact that it matters whether you get permission or validation from him or not, eventually the system will change and adjust.
You are suggesting you got to just know that you deserve it, own it, just do it.
Right.
And as women, we are seeking permission, like, yeah, it's okay that you do that. Or we're seeking that they understand the way we feel or emotionally get attached to it, where it's just like they're able to just do it. And sometimes women are so scared, aren't they, to even suggest that they need to go for a walk, or they're even afraid that they could walk out the door and go do that.
Because there's internal judgment and then there's external judgment, and all of it is going on in that dynamic. And your job is to quiet those words, to quiet the things that you know, own that this is important to you and you don't need to defend it, and just take it. And it's hard and it's going to be scary and you're going to feel guilty and you're going to have all of those thoughts. But as you do it and then you recognize that not only is it healthy for you, but it also becomes healthy for your family because they're watching you care for yourself. And then you're showing back up healthier, more connected and engaged with them. Your husband's watching you do that. He's also now having to take more responsibility. Naturally, you've just upgraded, right? Your entire family. It's hard, but you just have to do it.
How do you take care of yourself?
I am very, very diligent about guarding. For me, mostly it's my morning time because that's the space that the house is quiet. It's the space when nothing is planned because people don't generally plan things before 5 o'clock in the morning. And so for me, it's really consistent discipline over time. So I wake up about 5 o'clock and that's my prayer, meditation, my writing time, and also my workout time. And I do them in that order. And I get at least a couple of hours in every morning before I have to start my day. And that grounds me and it centers me. It keeps me physically healthy. It's just completely worth it to me. And I find that any time that I go off of that schedule, I feel it not just in my body, I feel it in my psyche. I'm not as present for my clients or for my people. And so for me, those couple of hours every single morning, that's my self-care time.
You must have to go to bed early to get up that time.
I have struggled with sleep, so I'm not going to lie about that. I have to be very careful about making sure that I'm not taking in carbs. When I don't take in many carbs, especially simple carbs, I don't require as much sleep. When I do, then it's a lot harder to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I think generally I probably require a little less sleep. I get 7 hours every night. As long as I'm in bed by 10, I'm good.
Have you seen a demand for more therapy and assistance with relationships during the pandemic?
Without a doubt. My business just went absolutely crazy after the pandemic. I had an associate and an assistant because I couldn't even keep up with the calls. But the reality is that depression, anxiety, suicidality, all of that has really increased significantly since the beginning of COVID, unfortunately. And all the way down to our junior high schoolers and elementary kids.
So finding just feeling really overwhelmed with the restrictions, the lockdowns, the reality of not being able to do our normal routine. What are some tips if we've got people currently in lockdown at the moment? How can they keep a healthy relationship either with their husband or even as a family together?
I think it's two things. When we're all together, we don't recognize that sometimes we can be all together and not together, right? So we might think that we don't need family time because we're all here together. You might think that you guys are connecting even though you aren't. So even though you're in lockdown, it's still very important to still have family time, to still have movie night, to still have those times that you're connecting intentionally as a family. The other thing is that when you're all together, you're missing out on your own personal space and time. And so, in addition to making sure that you're still having family time, you also have to make sure that you're getting your own space, whether it's needing to go out for a walk by yourself, whether it's needing to go out for a drive by yourself, whether it's retiring earlier, something you can do inside or outside of your house that is your own me space. It's super important to get that. That's the case for families and even for couples, because couples are not necessarily used to spending so much time together, right? And so you have to make sure that you're coming apart and having your own space. Now, it's the opposite for people who are living by themselves, because this time can be horribly isolating. And what you have to do is sometimes put it on your calendar every day and make sure that daily you are connecting with someone so that you're not getting in that place of being so isolated that you're sinking into a depression. We humans were made for connection. And you might not think that a few minutes you spend in line with someone at the grocery store, or the time you spend with somebody on the subway, or any of the interactions mean anything to you during your day when you're out with a lot of people. But when you're isolated at your home, your body feels it and the effects will be there. So it's important to be very intentional about getting connected.
Dr. Zoe Shaw, one of the things that has been coming out of lockdowns and unfortunately out of the global pandemic, there's been an increase in domestic violence, sadly. Really, that's been one of the concerns about lockdown. So it's great for obviously people that have a healthy relationship, that there's not drug abuse in the relationship or alcohol abuse. But there are a lot of women, sadly, in situations with partners who may be not serving their highest good.
Mm-hmm.
Have you had some experience working with clients in the work you do? Have you got any advice for women if they're in a really terrible relationship but they're too afraid to leave?
That ambivalent place is one of the worst places to be. The reality is that a woman who's in an abusive relationship the average is attempt 7 times before she actually leaves. If and when she does, the average attempt is 7. And so I would say to the woman who's in that place, who might have tried to leave or left and come back, that unfortunately she's in the norm. So the fact that she's feeling all of that ambivalence is part of the actual abuse that she's experiencing. So don't give up. Don't feel like, well, I tried and I can't, that there's no hope for me anymore. I'm saying keep trying to figure it out, keep trying to find the space, protect yourself, get your distance. And we all know what one of the hallmarks of abuse is that the spouse or partner will often try to isolate. And that isolation makes it really creates a situation where you don't see any options because you tend to have shut off a lot of of connections outside of your family. And so one of the antidotes for that is to start connecting, even if it's a phone call, even if it's over Zoom. Reach out to people in your life who cared about you before, who still care about you now, who you might have lost connection with. And you'll find that as you continue to grow connections outside of this relationship, things can get healthier for you. You'll develop more strength. You'll see more options. Things will open up for you.
And I always hear of a lot of people staying in an unhealthy relationship because financially they can't afford to separate or to leave. But this is having a detrimental effect on their own mental health and also for the children. So you're seeing it more and more, even in the pandemic. We're just really together for the kids.
It's interesting because when we look kind of globally and over time, the financial reasons have lessened that women are staying with husbands, which is really why part of the reason why the divorce rate has increased, right? But I think we're probably kind of on a different swing. And there's a couple of things going on with that. One is that millennials especially, I think they fall into two camps. One is they see marriage as a business proposition. And then two is they see marriage as I'm marrying my very best friend, right? I'm going to be doing life with. And they tend to be very, very, very intentional about that marriage. So I don't know that I'm seeing an increase in people wanting to stay for financial reasons. I think that what I do tend to see with women who want to stay for financial reasons, that the financial reasons are the excuse. Because really most of them, and these are women that I see in my practice, so it might not be representative of all the women out there. Most of the women that I see in my practice have financial ability to leave. Now, will it be the same? Will you have to struggle a little harder? Will you not have all of the extra amenities? Sure. But are you actually financially unable? Not so much, but it is that you won't be able to live the same lifestyle that you have now. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with acknowledging that. And that for some reason that might be more important for you, right? Whatever your goals are that you have for your life, whatever matters to you. Obviously, if kids get involved, there's this question of dysfunction. And then you're kind of riding the fence. Which dysfunction or which pain is healthier for your kids or better, right? The pain of separating a family or the pain of living in the dysfunction. And so that gets complicated because you really have to weigh out how much dysfunction is there, how much is it affecting the kids, and how much is it not, how much of it is affecting you in the marriage. So it's difficult. It's complicated. I hear all kinds of excuses. I hear people who have been married for 30 years and have adult children and say that they don't want a divorce because of the children who don't even live in their homes and might live across the country. So it's very personal why people choose to stay in a marriage that's dysfunctional.
Are people fearful of others finding out that their relationship isn't working? They don't want to be a failure in their relationship.
I have the honor of being able to see the window through people's lives as individuals and in relationships. And across the board, everybody has something that they're dealing with. And I don't know how much of it now is about what other people think. I'm not hearing that so much as I am about what people are thinking about themselves, if that makes sense. The meaning that divorce has for them.
When you're in a relationship, how can you grow in the relationship? Because I hear a lot of people grow apart, but how can you continue to grow together?
That's an excellent question. And it takes a lot of intentionality. It takes both of you wanting to invest in the relationship and recognizing that each of you has to give the other person space because, we marry somebody, we get with somebody, and our intention is for them to stay this way forever. Sometimes we decide we want to fix them, right? And we want to create this better version of them. But a lot of times we want our partners to stay as they are, instead of recognizing that a healthy relationship isn't that. A healthy relationship gives space for our partners to grow and become more of who they are, right? To change. And sometimes change is very scary. And as we see a partner changing, we tend to distance. We tend to have fear, which we tend to grab on, right? Which then pushes them away. And so I think when you're looking at longevity in a relationship, one of the keys is to allow your partner's space to grow and change.
What about for the woman or the person that's trying to get into a relationship, so actually find someone, but they're feeling really insecure because now with online dating, there's a lot of options out there. How can the woman either build her self-esteem up to say, hang on a minute, I'm worthy? Can they do that through self-talk? How does a woman feel that she doesn't have to be concerned
and might sabotage something, right? That isn't there to begin with. I feel so deeply for women who are dating these days. This day and age, like no other time in the world, is the very hardest time to date. Women are geared very differently from men. And that's just a reality that we try to not want to acknowledge sometimes, but there is a reality to that. And this modern world of swiping, of having everything fully available at your fingertips, makes it extremely hard for men to commit. And women too. So I'm not going to say it doesn't go both ways. But if we're talking to a woman who's really looking for that, what she has to do is change her lens. What she has to do is recognize that dating is different, and she needs to visualize a line of men that she will go through, right? And there's a whole junkyard of mess out there. It's worth it because there is actually a treasure there. And she only needs to find one. But often what happens is women get tired and they go on the second or third date and the guy ghosts them. Or maybe they get to that spot between 4 and 8 dates that is so very difficult when all of a sudden things seem like they're perfect and he ghosts them. That is the reality of the landscape today. And if you brace yourself for that, if you see it as a lens of a junkyard and you're just looking for one treasure, then you'll have a very different experience than if you see this guy as, I met him, now we're going to kind of proceed this way. It's easy to get very disappointed. And so, yes, when it comes to self-talk, it's important to lift yourself up. It's important to remind yourself that you do not need to change who you are. You do not need to compromise your values. You do not need to bend into a pretzel in order to be worthy and valued and accepted, right? If you find you're doing that, you need to leave the relationship, period. There will be others that come along. And when we convince ourselves that there won't be, then we compromise ourselves. And then our self-esteem plummets even more.
And it's so sad, isn't it, that people can have a really intimate relationship and then be ghosted, as in blocked, and not even an explanation of why they no longer want to see you. And then they might find out later on when they go back onto this so-called dating site that they're put their profile back up again. And you can really see why women or men get so hurt and so upset. And we're living in a time where the ghosting sadly has become the norm, but really remembering these are people's emotions and it's their life. And it's always best, isn't it, to tell someone the truth, like, I'm not so into you, or I no longer want to date you. I've had a great time. Thank you very much. But
those are the most caring, considerate words. And we think they aren't, and so we don't want to say them, so we just ghost instead. But the most caring and considerate words are, I'm not that interested. Have a great life.
And just saying it like that. So at least giving the person closure so they actually know, so they're not at home wondering, what did I do wrong? Was it me? Am I not good enough? I just feel that if everybody stopped ghosting and actually was just straight up, straight down the line, like, this is how it is, then we wouldn't have so many broken hearts and so many people really suffering through heartbreaks and wondering what's wrong with them. Now, Dr. Zoe Shaw, you are huge on self-talk, as in the words that we say about ourselves.
Right.
as women is so important. The stories that we're telling ourselves. A lot of women may find themselves comparing themselves to others on Instagram, feeling maybe inadequate, feeling they're not enough. Maybe they don't have enough likes on their posts. Maybe they don't have enough followers. Maybe they're not popular enough. Like, there's so much pressure now just being a human being with the social media, because it's all public. Everyday people have counts on their head. They're being analyzed. They're being judged based on their looks, or judged on their clothes, or judged on their followers. We're living in judgmental times, which really needs to stop. However, what about the woman who's really, her self-talk is down in the dirt? It's like, I'm dumb, I'm fat, I'm not enough. They're just beating themselves up inside. What would you say to that woman who is just beating herself up all the time and really just bringing herself down all the time?
It's time to change. It's not working. It's making you feel worse. And on top of that, those aren't your words. Those are words that you adopted from people maybe long time ago in your childhood and other people along the way. And those people may have left your life, but you kept their words. And how unhealthy. So you already know that, right? You already know that that is unhealthy, the way that you're speaking to yourself. You already know that you would not speak to your best friend and maybe not even your enemy that way. And so the reality is that we talk to ourselves more than we talk to anybody else, and we talk to ourselves more than anybody speaks to us. So we are truly our biggest influencers, because words are super powerful. And so for a woman who's doing that, I'd say, hey, it's time to change. It's time to go ahead and work on changing that. And it is changeable. The very first thing I would ask a woman to do is to start tracking what she's saying to herself every day. And that can be terrifying. That can be hard to admit, all of the things that you're saying to yourself. You know, once you have knowledge, you can't unknow something. And so I would suggest that you track it all. And then one by one, look at all of those things that you say to yourself. They cannot be true completely. So the first thing I'm going to say is they can't be 100% true. So then there's some lie there in that statement. I want you to find that, and I want you to write down the opposite. I want you to write down something that is or could be true about you, and make your list of affirmations based on the very negative things that you're saying to yourself. Say those affirmations every time you recognize that you're saying something negative to yourself. Say those affirmations 10 times when you wake up in the morning, 10 times before you go to bed at night. You can change your self-talk.
I love that. I love those words of wisdom, Dr. Zoe Shaw. Incredible. So write down, as confronting as it is,
Yes.
literally become aware of your self-talk and just write it down.
Right.
Whatever it might be. And then spend some time to really to think about it, and then look at the statement. Is it true? Not. But go back to your truth. So when we were little, we just absolutely loved ourselves.
Yes.
We loved ourselves. Like, I just remember, I just thought I was the bee's knees. I was just like, I can do anything. As you grow older, there's so many labels maybe put on you. It can really affect your self-talk or your confidence, the way you show up. It's so important though, isn't it, to just really tune in, like you said, write down, then look at it again, but to change that negative self-talk into positive self-talk or self-love talk.
Exactly.
We're going to have to change the narrative, aren't we? And then we've got to come up with, you mentioned positive affirmations. Does that mean I am strong, I am capable, I am powerful, I am beautiful, I am enough? But then do we have to cultivate the belief in it? Like, actually believe it?
Here's the reality. Your brain believes what you tell it. It believes all the negative stuff. It believes that you're stupid. It believes that you can't do that thing. It believes that you're unattractive because you tell it. That's the only reason why it believes that. So people think, well, how do I believe it? By telling yourself what you want to believe. That's how it works. It seems like it doesn't because you're not paying attention to all the negativity that you're pouring into your brain. But your brain believes what you tell it. So the answer is yes. And I suggest you pick really specific ones depending on what you're feeling about yourself. And yes, you want to tell yourself something that is more true and positive at the same time.
Absolutely an inward job, and incredible words of wisdom, Dr. Zoe Shaw. How can we stay in touch with you now after the podcast show?
So I'm on Instagram. That's kind of my place that I hang out. And my handle is Dr. Zoe Shaw, DrZoeShaw. I'd also encourage anyone to listen to my podcast. It's recently been rebranded. It's called Stronger in the Difficult Places. It's specifically for women who are struggling, maybe in difficult relationships, or they're in a difficult spot in their relationships, and not even just marriage relationships, but all kinds of relationships in their life. So I encourage you to listen to that, hop on my email list, and stay connected with me.
I really love your work. I've listened to a lot of your talks. You have incredible blogs on your website, so I'll make sure I include the links, and also your YouTube channel. Your talks there are so incredible. I learned a lot within just like a 15-minute YouTube moment. So Dr. Zoe Shaw, thank you for all of the work you do, helping women in particular to feel confident, to feel good, to have healthy relationships with their self first, with their family, with their friends, community, and their partner or husband. But also thank you for empowering women who aren't in a healthy relationship to either get out. And I love the message to keep themselves safe during these times in lockdown. So keep the connection open. And it was really sweet that you touched on those who aren't in a relationship, that don't even have kids and don't have a partner, aka that's me. I fall in all of those. And I have learned during lockdown, it's so important to stay connected. And really, I do value going to the grocery store and having that conversation with the girl that serves me, or the woman. So thank you again for all of the work you do. Really, thank you.
Thank you for the work that you do, and I'm honored to be here.
Thanks, Dr. Zoe Shaw. So we'll say goodbye to Dr. Zoe Shaw. Be sure to subscribe, to leave a 5-star rating and review, and to tell someone you love to. And together, let's feel good from within.